2006 Ford Taurus with a 3.0 liter engine. Problem with this vehicle is just a check engine light, no running problems. Let's go to the scan tool, see what we got. Here's a list of our trouble codes. P0420 is the one we want to address today, which is our bank 1 cat efficiency below limit. We're not going to worry about the P1000, which just simply means someone was here and cleared the codes before we got here. And then also our engine speed RPM limiter reached. So either somebody hit the rev limiter on this with the RPM, or it was actually a mile per hour issue. We're not worried about that. We do have to consider the P1000 code, however, because this means someone was here and cleared the codes, and not all of the tests have been completed yet by this OBD computer. So there could be other faults. You wouldn't want to let this vehicle go and promise this customer that he'll be fine after addressing this P0420 code. You know, there could be other issues here that sets a check engine light. So we always want to warn customers when there are monitors that are not complete for OBD2. Really, you need to cover your butt. That's what it's about. So we're going to do this P0420 trouble code. And the first thing I like to do when I have these is go to our data and we're going to pull up our O2 sensors. And we'll do a custom data display. Just limit our data PIDs here. We're going to pull up our O2 sensors. We'll pull up our short-term and long-term fuel trim too. And what we'll do first is we'll graph these O2s. These two right here on this left column are my upstreams. This is bank 1, bank 2 upstream. These two are behind the cat. Downstream for bank 2, downstream for bank 1. I'm going to start this car and we're going to warm this up. Take a look at these cats when we get them hot. So watch this scan data, and of course we have a annoying noise here. It's our power steering pump is a little noisy. I'll have to get some fluid in here. I can quiet this up. It is low, probably a leak. But as this is warming up, we want to watch these O2s, the upstream and the downstream. And I'm going to hold the RPM up to warm the cats up a little bit faster, warm the O2s up faster, warm the system up faster. I'm going to zoom out a little bit on the data, a little bit better idea what's going on. Going to pause that right there for 1 second and talk about this data that we're looking at. A lot of the material that you're going to see out in the field is going to give you waveforms and talk about bad cats, and they'll say that, you know, compare your upstream and compare your downstream, and if the downstream looks like the upstream, you have a bad cat, and that's what that looks like right now compared to the bank 2. The thing is, there's variables with this. You can have a good cat that looks like that when it's cold. So we don't want to make those kind of blanket statements. The other thing too that you'll read is downstream O2 should be steady all the time, and that's also untrue. If you're at wide open throttle and your upstreams are rich, so are your downstreams. If you do a rapid decel when the injector's shut off, you're gonna have a lean condition in that exhaust, the downstreams are gonna drop lean. So there is gonna be some reaction. I don't like this already for sure. And a bad cat will exhibit that the bad cat looks, that the downstream looks like the upstream on that bad cat, but you just have to understand there's variables there. So I want to heat this up more. Let's get that one out of the way. Let's heat this cat up. Let's get them nice and hot and make sure that we're getting good data here. Fan just turned on. Let you guys watch this for a little bit. Definitely don't like this one at all. There's way too much activity on that cat. You know, the fact is though, guys, we got a lot of cat codes that the downstream sensor ends up looking like that, and we still have a code for it. So we can't just simply rely on the signal alone and its frequency to say that cat's good or bad. Pause that real quick. This one, however, we have this hot enough that this Bank 1 Sensor 1 cat is definitely faulty. Now there's some things we need to consider with cat codes too, and that's the oxygen sensors themselves, and then also exhaust leaks. So we want to make sure we don't have any exhaust leaks, which we don't, in particular upstream of the cat. And then also you'd have to worry about the frequency, the amplitude of the O2s, and these are looking pretty good. But I want to show you another test. Let me unfreeze this now. Let this roll. And the test I want to do is a propane enrichment test. It's also known as an oxygen storage test, and I'm sure there's a few ways to do this. Let me zoom you out here for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, right behind the scan tool, I'm going to take the air cleaner, just loosen it, and I'm going to take this propane bottle and I'm going to go right into the intake right here with propane, and I'm going to keep you focused on my scan data, with the exception this time, with the difference this time of showing you my short-term, long-term fuel trim, mainly short-term. We'll just keep the short-term in the view here. And I'll do the test and then I'll describe it to you. I'll pause the screen and describe it to you. So there's my short-term Bank 1 and Bank 2. Actually, let you look at the long-term real quick before we go any further, just so you can see that this car is running pretty well. We don't have any fuel trim issues. Long-term's at 0, 0 to 2. Short-term's perfect, right where it needs to be. So no mixture issues with this car right now. Again, we're just going to focus on the short-term for this test. I'm going to hold it at a higher RPM so I don't stall the engine out. And it's going to be a little bit tough to do. Kind of need a third hand, but we'll give it a shot. I'm going to raise the RPM. I'm going to add propane to the intake. First thing that should happen is these two upstreams should go rich. And watch the short term while I'm doing it. My two short term fuel trim values should go very, very negative. So raising the RPM first, and I'll tell you when I'm adding the propane. Zoom you out just a little bit more on this data, get a little bit more on the screen. All right, adding propane now. Want to add enough to keep those O2s rich. The upstream O2s, watch the short term, should be going very, very negative. Just shut the propane off. Pause this data capture and we'll talk about it. And what we want to look at is right where I turned the propane off. Remember, as I'm adding propane, we're minus 25% fuel trim at this point. And the reason the computer's doing that, these are my two upstreams right here. The reason the computer's doing that is trying to compensate for that rich condition. So right where I turned that propane off is about right in that area. See the upstreams drop lean at that point. Maybe one click over. Let's call it right there. And then we look at our downstreams, and what we want to see with a good cat is this cat should be able to catch and store oxygen. So we actually want to see a delay here. So if I turn the propane off, the reason the mixture goes very lean upstream is that minus 27% fuel trim command is still there. So we are flooding this exhaust with oxygen right here. And the reason that you have a delay in a downstream is that cat is actually absorbing some of that oxygen and causing that delay. That's what we want to see with a good cat, is a delay in that response. Notice the response time of the bank 1 sensor 1, it's almost the same as the upstream. Now I'll zoom in on this a little bit more to give you a little bit better perspective. And I'm actually maybe off a little bit on that cursor. Kind of tough to get it right there. But you can definitely see a difference between these two. Now here's the issue. I don't have a good time frame for you guys. I have some stuff in my book where I've done some experimentation with this. I have one capture of roughly 2 to 4 seconds of delay time. I've seen good cats delay 8 to 10 seconds. Now the problem with the scan tool is these are frames. Unlike a scope that does voltage over time, a scan tool reports voltage over frame, and my issue is I don't know how long 5 frames of data is. So what we have here is from 1995 or 96 to roughly 2000. We have about 5 frames of data in delay time for this bank 2 cat. And you know, we have maybe 2 frames of data for this one. Or maybe even 1 if we could call it 2. So it's a test you can do. You can see the difference between the 2 cats. This one definitely needs to be replaced, this bank 1 cat. But it would be nice to get some numbers here, and I think what I'll do to just kind of further this is I would like to get a time frame for you guys, and I'm going to hook the scope up to these 4 now, And then we can do voltage over time, do the same check, and then I can give you a time frame. But truthfully, yeah, you know what? I can't even make that statement. I was going to say that it's potential here that this cat is also faulty, especially when you're looking at it from a zoomed out level. There is not much delay time there. And, you know, this is kind of showing you the value of this test too, is you can have converters that are on the verge of failing. Or, you know, truthfully, we have that P0430 code. Maybe we had a P0430 code too, which is our bank 2 code, and it just hasn't showed back up yet. There's a real good possibility that the recommendation for this car is going to be to do both cats. So let's do the oxygen storage test again using the scope and see the result of that. All right, little discrepancy here, guys. One of the reasons we need to be careful about model years and where we're getting our information from. This car is from a body shop. This has a label on the front. It says it's a 2006, but the VIN tag, the 10th VIN number is a 7, so this is actually a 2007. And I had it entered right on the scan tool. I misquoted this video at the beginning. This is a 2007. Go by the VIN tag behind the windshield when in doubt. For this next segment, what I want to show you guys is the scope tests of this oxygen storage on these cats. And what we've done to connect to all 4 oxygen sensors, we've connected to the engine computer instead of crawling underneath the car and locating the downstream O2 sensor connectors and the upstream connectors too. We went to the engine computer, and this was by no means easy to do. We actually had to unbolt the computer connector and pull it out, find the pin numbers and wire colors, and it was not fun, but we got all 4 O2s connected now. And let me get you a shot on the Verus. This is a frozen picture of the same test. So we ran it at a couple thousand RPM for a few minutes, got the cats nice and hot. The signals you're looking at on the screen here, the yellow trace is my upstream on bank 1. My red trace is my downstream on bank 1. Green trace is the upstream on bank 2, and the blue trace here is the downstream on bank 2. And remember, we have a cat code on bank 1 only, no code on bank 2. And really looking at just the upstream and downstream O2 signals as the scan data showed us, this is really enough info here to condemn the cat. We ran it for a long time. We should never see a hot cat with the same frequency and amplitude as an upstream. So the downstream sensor, the cat monitoring sensor, we don't want to see the same frequency and amplitude as the upstream. Definitely a bad cat for these two. So if you would just look at this area in here, I want to talk about this for a second, because I see a lot of material out there that is kind of true, but I don't know, I just don't like blanket statements. So what we'll see in material out there is they'll talk about these two and say, okay, we have a bad cat on bank 1, and I would agree. And that they'll look at these two and say, we have a good cat on bank 2. This one is the one that we have to worry about. You can have a cat that has a flatline signal at times and look like a good cat, but fail the OBD test for the cat. So the onboard computer fails it for efficiency. So maybe this test can help you with identifying those that look good as far as amplitude and frequency, but maybe they don't look good for an oxygen storage test. And in this area here is where I'm adding fuel, and you see all the O2s went rich. At that moment in time, the short-term fuel trim command takes all the fuel away, and so I keep it there for a while. And the reason I add that propane for a period of time is I want to give that short-term value a chance to take away a lot of fuel, not just a little bit. So I let it go for a while, and then I shut the propane off here. And what I can do is zoom in on this area now, where everything drops lean right there. that is where I turn the propane off. You can see that the bank 1 is pretty much identical in time as far as oxygen storage goes, and the bank 2 actually shows a delay. So again, upstream sensors here. I turn the fuel off. The reason it drops really lean really fast is the computer's still commanding fuel to be negative, taking fuel away. So that's why we have flatline lean condition here. So we're pumping oxygen into the exhaust, and then what we look at is how long does it take for the cat to respond to that, and you see the delay in time here. So let's get a time measurement on this. And this isn't exact as far as where I'm placing these cursors, but we'll get an idea of like kind of right where it drops. You know, this doesn't have to be exact, because what I'm finding is it should be, I don't know, I have some pictures of good ones from 2 to 4 second delay. I have some brand new cat pictures. This is actually in section 5 in my book at the very end. If you refer to the last couple pages, I'm showing some oxygen storage tests. I have one capture that shows 2 to 4 seconds. I have another capture that shows 6 to 10 second delay, and that was on brand new cats. And this one, let me get a number for you guys, 0.64 between my cursors. So my delta time between my two cursors here and here, between 1 and 2. Let me make sure I'm looking at this right. Yeah, my time difference between cursors 1 and 2 is just over a half a second long. And I have to be honest with you guys, I don't think it's enough. I think what we have is a bank 2 cat that's ready to flag a code as well. And I think for this customer, I'm going to recommend both cats. Definitely going to say he needs the bank 1 cat, and I'm going to warn him about the bank 2 cat at the very least. So I think it's a valuable test to identify maybe even a cat that might look good further into it. Like I said, come back out on this picture and look in this area, you might say, hey, that's a good cat, but I don't like the oxygen storage of that cat. Now, one last comment for you guys is I don't have enough known goods to give you a set time frame on this. I have a few captures. I'm going to do a lot more, I think, this term and get some better numbers and get an average on what all these cats can handle in the time frame, that time delay. So I'll maybe update you guys on that later, but I don't like this one at all. Bad cat, bank 1, suspect a cat that's failing on bank 2. Okay, some final thoughts on putting a cat in this car. There's some things that we want to consider before just putting converters in cars. One, I mentioned before, make sure we don't have any exhaust leaks upstream. Number 2 is you want to make sure the engine's running well. Look at your fuel trim numbers, make sure your fuel trim numbers are normal, make sure that there's no misfires or anything like that. Make sure the car has been maintained. And the truth is, a lot of you guys are seeing the same thing I am, which is we get these cars in and the damage may have been done thousands of miles ago, and it just finally has showed itself in the form of a cat code. But we get these cars in that have absolutely zero running problems, and we have these converter codes, and when we put converters in them, we're fixing them. So I guess another warning too that I see a lot is when you use aftermarket cats. I'm just not seeing them meet the same standards. I can think of at least 10 GMs that have had converters put on them that 2 to 3 months later they come back with the same cat code they had before, and the only fix is to put a factory cat on it. I've seen it on Lexus, Toyota, a lot of different manufacturers. I'm seeing that the only fix for these is to use a factory cat. And I'm not talking about a direct bolt-on OEM compatible. I'm talking about buying it directly from the factory is the fix. And of course you can go on IETN and read about a lot of the cat issues, and I'm sure there's a ton of other variables, anywhere from reprograms to issues with oxygen sensors and things like that. But I just make sure myself that the O2s are switching, that they're switching fast, And I don't know if we can really show too much of that. I don't see what our switch rate here is on our upstream O2 kind of frequency number. Throw some cursors in here. I'll just place them within a 1 second period. I generally like to see a 1 to 2 hertz signal when I look at oxygen sensors. So we're going from high to low to high in this 1 second period. Between my two cursors is 1 second. So I have a 1 hertz signal on my upstream sensor here. I have just over a 1 hertz signal on my bank 2 upstream O2, so I don't see any issue with the O2. That would be something to consider. I've heard sluggish O2s, a sluggish upstream can be a factor too. I've never seen that. Generally speaking, what I see, I don't see any oxygen sensor trouble codes. I only have a CAT code. I don't even hesitate with it anymore. Pretty much needs a CAT, a factory CAT. Just make sure the engine's running good. But so, there's some other checks. Look at your frequency of your O2s. You know, you want to make sure your downstreams respond too, and that's as simple, it's easy on this one. This cat's totally dead, but on one like this down here that it's not moving much, you can flood it with fuel just by fluttering the pedal and watch the reaction of the downstream sensor and make sure you're good there. And so, you know, I am by no means an expert on the chemistry of catalytic converter construction and all the variables that come with it, but I know enough to put a cat in a car when I see one, and hopefully I've given you guys enough information to maybe take your knowledge a little bit further and expand on what I'm doing here. And like I said, I'm going to update this at a later point in time with some more oxygen storage numbers. Our CAT on this vehicle, the oxygen storage on this, right in this area, right in here, you can see the delay a little bit better zoomed out, that this area was only about a half a second. And I don't think it's enough. When you see P0420 codes, that would be for your bank 1. And when you see P0430 codes, that would be for bank 2. This is bank 2, this is bank 1. Again, I'm going to recommend both cats. We definitely need bank 1, no question about it. I'm going to recommend bank 2, and I'll get you guys some numbers later with this time delay. Again, what I said, the case studies I have in my book in section 5, I'm seeing between say 2 to 4 in the one capture and 6 to 10 seconds in the other capture. Way more time than what I'm seeing here, and that's what I'm going by to recommend this cat. Final thought on this Ford, guys, I forgot to mention it, was the test that we did for this cat. This was not for a restriction. We don't want to mix up restricted exhaust cat testing with efficiency cat testing. When you have an efficiency code for a cat, that does not mean you have a plugged up exhaust. You can also have a plugged up exhaust, which would be a melted cat, and not have an efficiency code. Two completely separate tests. You do back pressure testing for plugged exhausts. The efficiency test that we just showed you is not for low power conditions and things like that. We can have a cat that has perfectly good flow through it, not restricting the exhaust, and still be bad because it doesn't do its job anymore. We can also have a cat that's completely plugged up and causing a running problem. So two ways that they fail, and I want to be clear on that. And I know some of you are probably going to chime in here and say that, why don't you do inlet and outlet temperature tests on the converter? And I have to be honest with you guys, I don't like that test. I just think there's too many variables to it. I mean, what if you have a clean running engine, it's running perfectly? Is your outlet of the cat going to be hotter than the inlet? That's the theory behind it. The outlet should be 10% hotter. It's just, there's variations to that. How well is that engine running? How long have you been running the car? Did you warm it up sufficiently? I don't know. I don't like the temperature test, but to each his own. Hopefully you guys like the oxygen storage test that I've shown you today. It's another way, another tool you can put in your toolbox when it comes to cat testing.